Hi, I'm Charlotte Cagny, again from Birth Essence for the Birth Confidence Summit, and today I'm welcoming Mandy Rees from Blossom Yoga and Wellbeing, teaching pregnancy yoga and postnatal yoga. And welcome, Mandy.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. Lovely to be here.
I know, it's wonderful, and it's really great to see you here, especially when I know you've just run a marathon. This is not my official question at all, but I just, because I've seen you running the marathon, and you ran it in aid of the Baby Loss Awareness Week and the local maternity,
Yes,
the Woodland House thing. So
yeah, Woodland House that we're trying to build here in Birmingham. Yes, so
mm-hmm.
it was perfectly timed marathon right in the middle of Baby Loss Awareness Week.
That was really great.
Yeah.
And I love that you're doing that. And one of the reasons I wanted to mention it was the conversation we had just before I pressed record, was that so many people compare, birth to, I've seen a few articles comparing birth to marathon and saying how we get cheered on for a marathon, but we don't necessarily get cheered on. So I'd love to hear your comparison of birth and a marathon, seeing as you've done both.
Yeah. Well, for me, running a marathon is harder than birth. And actually, for me, it takes me longer to run a marathon than it did for me to have both of my girls. So I ran 25 minutes than that. But you're right, when we run a marathon, we have people cheering us on the whole way. So the route is lined with people shouting you on, encouraging you, tapping you on the shoulder, checking you're all right. At the end, you get a big medal and you get your goodie bag. I don't remember ever receiving a medal for having given birth, or having people cheering me along. Yeah, you've got your partner there and the midwife supporting you, but it's not kind of the same sense of glory that you get when you cross the marathon finish line. Both exhausting, both require preparation, whether we call it preparation or training. But yeah, I think there's a problem there, isn't there, that we don't value women and birth enough.
Yeah, we're valuing the marathon like a major achievement, but we're not seeing the major achievement, maybe because more people do it, but it isn't a major achievement.
Yeah, well, I think because it's just taken for granted that women will continue to have babies and that's what we do, that it's not seen as anything particularly significant or special. When birth happens, we celebrate the baby, not always the mother. I suspect different cultures are probably better at it than we are. I don't have enough knowledge of other cultures, but I suspect they have a greater celebration of the mother than we do.
I think we probably used to, and we've lost it when the the systematic destruction of midwives hundreds of years ago, and the lay knowledge and herbal knowledge that happened. I think we probably lost some of our traditions. But one of the things that struck me in the conversation we had before was you said that giving birth gave you the confidence to run a marathon. Could you say a bit about that?
Yeah, well, I think giving birth gave me an innate understanding of my body that I hadn't really had before. I think as an individual, I've always been quite in touch with how I feel about things. I've always, been generally fit and active when I was younger. I had that classic time in your 20s when you're just doing too much of the non-active stuff and not looking after yourself. And as a result of that, I became quite poorly at the end of my 20s, and it made me reassess what I was doing. But giving birth made me understand how strong my body could be if I believed in her and dug deeper and followed my intuition and what my body was telling me. And it was the confidence that I got from having given birth and come through that postnatal period, which for me was much more difficult than the birth itself, made me realize that if I did prepare properly and I did do the training and I did listen to my body, that I could really do anything if I set my mind to it. So I wouldn't even have contemplated running a marathon, I don't think, if I hadn't had children, because I would have just assumed that I wasn't strong enough. But I know that giving birth is one of the hardest things you will do, in terms of, it does put a lot of physical pressure on your body. Mentally, you've got to be prepared, you've got to have the right mindset for it. And in the similar way as giving birth, a marathon actually is more headspace, mindset than necessary physical condition, because there's all shapes and sizes of people that run a marathon. It's unbelievable the different types of people that run. You know, normal people run marathons, which I would have never thought normal people could run marathons, that, you know, you'd have to be some kind of super athlete. In the same way, everyone can give birth if they prepare, if they believe, if they have the confidence. I think subject to some of us, you know, physically do have issues, but most of us could run if we put our minds to it and did all the preparation. But for me, it was knowing that I could go through birth, and the strength that required made me think, well, actually, if I can do that, then if I do it properly, I'm pretty sure I can get myself around a marathon. But yeah, it was the understanding of my body and the trust in my body. Actually, I got through birth. It gave me the confidence to sign up for that first London Marathon and then go from there.
I think that's wonderful. I really enjoyed that. I really love that story. I've not done a marathon myself. My dad has. He did one a number of years back, and he got a lot out of it, I think, as well. So I guess whatever your goals are, your dreams are, it's like going for it in that way is really that sense of achievement afterwards.
Yeah, and I think tying it back to how we view birth, we think, well, I'm running a marathon, so I have to train, I have to prepare. I've got a job interview coming up, so I have to prepare for that. I have to do my CV, I have to get my interview questions right. You know, I'm going on holiday, so I prepare for that. I need to check I have everything. You know, similar way with birth. I think some of us just think, well, everyone gives birth, don't they? Or, you know, many women give birth, so it's just going to happen. And I think that's part of the issue. We think birth happens to us, and we just kind of fall into it, rather than seeing it as something to properly prepare for mentally and physically, process any worries, anxieties, fears you have around it, and work out the best way for you as an individual to prepare for the best possible birth experience for you and your baby. I think, again, it goes back to how we as a society view birth.
Yeah, how we view and how we support it. Because if we had birth in the community, fully supported, and you would be able to just surrender into that, and it would just happen, because it wouldn't be just happening to you. You'd be surrounded by the support. You'd be it's kind of like we think, oh, we can just do it, but what we're just doing it in is a system that isn't supportive and trusting birth, so then it doesn't happen. The conditions aren't there for like physiological birth, so it's this kind of confused application of, oh, but birth is just what we're meant to do, but we're only meant to do it in the right conditions. And
well, this birth is what we're meant to do, but then we create this fearfulness around birth, that actually there's lots of things that can go wrong, and your baby's too big, your baby's too small, have you thought about this, or your pelvis is too little, your baby's not the right way round. We create this atmosphere of fear around it. So as soon as a mum gets an indication that her pregnancy might not be standard, whatever a standard pregnancy is, she becomes even more fearful, and her first option is, well, right, I'm going to go with what the system is telling me I should do, rather than really thinking about what actually is best for me and my baby. And it takes away people's confidence. I think people lose confidence in their ability to birth, and we're so compliant, and we believe that the system is there for us, that we follow the system. And I think we have a wonderful system. We know we're very, very lucky to have the NHS. It's an amazing thing. It saves mums and babies' lives every day, but also it's taking away people's choices. I think it's putting people on a route that serves the system, not necessarily that mum and that baby.
Yeah, it's really important knowledge to have. I think that if you're within the system, you need to know how it works, so you can get your results that you want from, despite the system, so to speak.
Yes. And I think not be fearful with the first response from the system. So I'm seeing so many more mums being measured for size of baby. You know, what is the normal size of a newborn baby? There is no average size, is there? You have to look at mum and dad, the size they are, what size they were when they were born, what size babies they tend to have in their family. But I think as soon as mums are told, oh, your baby's too big, your baby's too small, it just puts them in a place of fear. And it takes a really strong and brave mum to step away from that, do her research, and then go back and say, well, actually, I think my baby's fine.
Yeah.
I still want to have my home birth. I don't want to have an elective cesarean, even though you're telling me I'm having a big baby. I'm just going to go with the best birth that I think I want to have, or I should be having, and see what happens at that point. Lots of mums are too scared by the system, and therefore they do what the system tells them to do, because they think the actual system is serving them. And I think the system is often, because it's so under-resourced and overwhelmed, does what serves the system, not the mum.
Yeah. And what I find is it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy with the big baby thing, that you get scared, so then you do have problems birthing. You're probably not that big, or certainly not too big for you, baby, because what I'm finding is they measure and don't tell you, when they give you the measurement, that how inaccurate potentially that measurement is. They tell it you like, this is the measurement of your baby, it's this big. Then you can go next week and get a different person, and suddenly it's not that big anymore, or it's this more big, without and because they're worried about something happening that they hadn't noticed, and someone coming back at them to say, well, you should have checked.
But also, as you say, it's just inaccurate in itself. Different people will measure different sizes, but mums aren't sent away with information, this is what we think, but please look at this, which will tell you the chances of this measurement actually being right, and what, if any, risks there are of your baby being this size. In some cases there are valid reasons. You can definitely, there is a problem with your pregnancy and you need to be guided by that medical advice. But often the flippant comment, oh, this baby's measuring at 9 pounds 3 and you at 36 weeks, puts some mums just into a panic. And as you say, she goes into birth thinking, oh my God, I'm having this ginormous baby. There's no way I'm ever going to be able to birth this baby. So, of course, her body just goes into fight or flight. And therefore, chances are she's not going to have the most empowering birth experience, because she's frightened. And so's baby. Baby picks up on those fears from mum and partner, possibly as well. So the whole atmosphere of that birth space is very different to how it would be if mum and partner just were there going to give birth. Years ago, we didn't know what size our babies were, did we?
Before we had the scans, before we had the technology.
We'd
have the palpating. My midwife was very accurate with the palpating on how big the baby was, and that's directly on the baby, because the scans, when you have them, it's all echo technology, listening to the heart rate and everything, but palpating, you have your hands on that baby, you can communicate with the baby, talk to them.
But we're losing that skill, aren't we?
And I believe it's not the absolute measurement that makes the difference, like you were saying. So a big baby for one woman might be a problem, but a small baby for that woman might be a problem, depending on its position, whereas a big baby might be no problem for that woman. And I think we underestimate the capabilities of our body, like you said with the marathon talk.
A lot of it is positioning. So I think what a lot of women don't appreciate, and I talk about this a lot in my classes, is there's so much you can do during your pregnancy to keep your body in a place of balance, so that your baby has enough space and the right space to be in the optimal position for birth. And I think lots of women focus on the process of birth itself, but don't appreciate that, pregnancy yoga is going to help, hypnobirthing is going to help, doing the reading if you want to do that is going to help, but actually looking after yourself and being aware of what your body is doing during pregnancy makes a huge difference. We know if you know you have an imbalance in your pelvis, or you've got your rib cage is out of balance or is very tight, that's going to restrict the space your baby has. Baby can only get into the space made available to them. Prepare as soon, do the work as soon as you know you're pregnant. Really look inwards to yourself about, how does my body feel? Do I feel balanced? Do I know that I have a physical issue that could affect birth? Because as you say, you could have a big baby, but if your baby's perfectly positioned and your body's beautifully balanced, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to have a wonderful vaginal birth experience with that baby. You know, we are lucky, we do have the technology now that if there does then become a complication and baby does get stuck for whatever reason, I know in emergency cesarean isn't first choice for people, but we do have that there. You know, we are lucky, the system we have does help us when we really need it. But I would much rather see women trusting their bodies, keeping them beautifully well and wholesome and balanced and healthy, going into birth, feeling really positive and empowered and excited, and seeing what happens with the preparation they've done, rather than just being frightened by the system and saying, you know what, I'm not even going to try it that way. Because so many mums have cesareans because they think they're having a baby of this size, and they're just not.
That's
I think my last
heartbreaking about it.
Yeah.
When the baby comes out normal size, that has an impact on the mother, who's like, well, could I have done it?
Yeah. Like one of my mums, she is a lovely petite lady, was told she was having like a 9-pound baby, and was really worried because she was so slight, and didn't go for a cesarean, had a vaginal delivery, ended up with assisted delivery, but I think baby was about 7 pounds 6. So
had she not been told that, she may have been more confident.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hard to withstand that, or to choose not to have the growth scans. That's a hard thing to withstand, the protocols or pressure in the system in that way.
Well, I think it's almost impossible for some mums, particularly first-time mums. It's not just the scans, is it? It's whether you go in for a sweep, whether you want to be induced, whether you want to be monitored. All those kind of things are really hard decisions for families to make unless you've done all your research and you know the information. Because, you know, we all know, you know, I have view on induction, as I'm sure you do, lots of people do. You hear stories of mums who are induced, who kind of wish they hadn't been, who gut feeling was telling them, actually, I just don't think my baby's ready to come out yet. We know due dates are very approximate. You know, there's no exact science around due dates. So we're, you know, telling babies to come into the world before they're ready. And that must be one hell of a shock to a baby who's quite comfortable, and then all of a sudden the hormones start to kick in and they're on their way, on their journey before they're ready. And I do hear mums saying, I just didn't feel that my baby was ready to be born. It just didn't feel right, but I didn't have the confidence to say no.
This is the really key point, I think, because induction can be really helpful and successful, and it can go absolutely terribly. And like in those cases, quite commonly, if you know the baby's not ready to be born, you're not feeling great about the induction, that's all those messages on top of the baby saying I'm not ready. So it's a conflict in your body, and a conflict that can make the process either not work or be very long and more painful and drawn out. And the key point is that you're saying women know. You're hearing a lot, think that they knew whether the baby was ready. Some people really want to have the induction and it feels aligned and they have a great time.
Yeah.
And but many, because the induction rate's like kind of gone through the roof, is many more are saying, well, I didn't really want that.
Yeah.
Finding the confidence.
Again, it's the system tells you that this is what you should be doing. And then the longer you wait, the scarier that message gets from the system. You know, you start getting told this is the risk. You know, I've had mums told, well, if you're not induced, your baby will it's a high chance your baby will not survive. You know, and that, there obviously is, the longer you take it, but it's not this sudden huge increase in the risk. And there isn't enough information made readily available to mums of what the risks really are. I think mums have to dig really deep into the information to drill down to the proper statistics before they can make a decision. Whereas, wouldn't it be better if those statistics were actually readily available to women as part of your hospital pack, or your conversations with your midwives, those kind of things, rather than keeping that I feel in a way the system says, well, we're going to keep this information hidden even though we have it, because actually we want you to have an induction, because then we know you're safe and baby's safe, and we don't really care about your birth experience, we just want you both to be safe. Which obviously we want mums and babies to be safe, but if chances are they will still be safe, I'm sure you and all the people who want them mums to step away with this brilliant birth experience that they've dreamed of, that they've wanted, because the birth experience of that generation influences the birth experience of the next generation, and it carries on and on and on. And at the moment, I think we're just creating fear. I don't want my girls to be fearful of birth because they've grown up in a culture that's fearful of birth. But I think the system hides the information so that women make the choice the system wants them to make, rather than the choice that's better for them.
Yeah, and it's very clear it's the system, not the individuals as well, because there's such wonderful individuals working.
Oh yeah, the individuals are amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're under pressure to follow the system, aren't they? That's the problem. And it probably takes a strong midwife to say to a mum, actually, I don't think you should have this induction yet, because she's
what
going
do you
against.
Feel? Go with what you feel, not with what.
Yeah.
The way they present the information. Here's our protocol, here's our recommendation. What do you feel? That's important.
Yeah, but we're losing
the bottom line.
Yeah, but we're losing our. Women are stepping away from their intuition around birth and motherhood because there's too many layers being pushed down on top of us. We're not tuning into our bodies, our babies, going with what we felt, which traditionally is what we'd have done, wouldn't we? Women would have been pregnant for just how long their pregnancy lasted for, because we didn't have the option of being induced. And some people naturally have a pregnancy of less than 40 weeks. Some have pregnancies of longer than 40 weeks. We're not all going to be the same. We're all different people. And that's what I constantly say to moms: don't get fixated on this due date. Your baby doesn't know it's their due date. Your baby's happy in there. What's your baby telling you? Listen to your baby. And I really want mums to spend more time intuitively listening to what their body and their baby's telling them. I'm big now on getting my mums to talk to their babies, communicate with their babies, be much more, in tune with their bodies and go inside a lot more. We all focus on, I've got my pram and I've got my Moses basket and I've got this and I've got that. And we all need to do that stuff. And it feels nice to be able to tick things off the list. But actually, growing a human being inside you is an intuitive process, I think. And remember that your baby is a huge part of the birth. Your baby is trying to be born, to move, to help you. Don't think of your baby as just being an inanimate baby that only starts moving once they're born, because they're doing that the whole way through your pregnancy. And how amazing is it to really feel that your baby is part of their birth? When we do my breathing exercises, I talk a lot about, how does your baby respond when you breathe deeper? How does your baby respond when you touch your tummy? Most mums will go, yeah, when I start to breathe really slowly, my baby responds. We don't know, do we? Maybe when we do our birthing breaths or hypnobirthing breaths during our pregnancy, does our baby learn how we're breathing? Does our baby notice those different breaths, or how mum's body feels, so that baby's using that breath to prepare for birth as well? So if you're able to use that kind of breath during birth, is it familiar to baby? Is it something they're familiar with? Does it feel safe? If you look at it from that point of view, if you think, well, the different way I breathe during my pregnancy, if I breathe in a way where I feel safe, I feel comfortable, I feel confident, and I'm able to replicate that during birth, does it make my baby feel safe and confident and more comfortable during their birth? And if you really think of it all coming together and you're all birthing together in this great big kind of bubble of breath and confidence and empowerment and feeling safe, what a brilliant welcome for a baby to just feel that. And then if you hold your baby close after they've been born and do the same breath, do they remember that breath from when they were inside you during your pregnancy? And would that breath just put your baby back into that safe place? That would just be amazing.
Beautiful. I think it's one of the big missing links I see often on forums where people are saying, oh, I'm going to be induced, or they say, what do I do? And you have the long list of things that people come up with, everything from eating pineapples and curry to pretty much running a marathon. We're going to get some exercise. Yeah. But there's very rarely someone who answers and says, ask your baby when they want to be born, what do you feel? Yeah. And I always usually put that on, and it's the missing link. And, what does your baby want? What do you want? What do you feel? What's happening? When? Or is there anything you're holding back on? Is there anything that needs to be put in place? How can you make it really happily? And the paradigm of trusting that they know and you know when to be born, rather than these desperate measures to avoid medical induction, let them out. And again, it takes confidence to do that, and training back in the confidence of trusting yourself is really important. And the other factor for is the baby. Like I know you do a lot of intuitive work and working with the babies, feeling the babies are talking to the mothers and want to be heard.
Yeah, I think they do. And I think we struggle with that because we're a very logical society and we work on logic and lists and, well, I haven't read it in a book necessarily, or this is not what I've been told in the stories I've been told around birth by my friends or my mum. We forget that our baby is a being. And I think sometimes mums feel a bit weird about talking to their babies during pregnancy, or they find it a concept that they struggle to get their heads around because it seems woo-woo and a bit out there and weird. But I always say, well, how do you think babies were born hundreds of years ago? With a woman surrounded by other women, and probably the wise woman of the village who was totally woo-woo and out there, and that's what she did. So birth should come from a place where you go take yourself right back to the early stories of birth and the basics of how you feel as a woman. So spend time sitting there with your hand on your baby, talking to them, asking them how they feel, exploring baby's fears around birth and your fears, and explain to your baby that your fears are not their fears, and you have 100% confidence in your baby. Just where you are lacking the confidence is in yourself, and then do the work on yourself, but see your baby as part of that journey. I always say, a phrase I always use is your baby's birth, whereas I think lots of people will say, well, when I gave birth, or my birth, but it's actually the birth of your baby. You are the mum giving birth to her baby, rather than some people say, well, people feel that kind of giving birth is done to us, rather than actually we are the ones doing this with our baby. And I think that actually if we tune into our babies more and understand our babies and understand our bodies, chances are we will have a much more positive birth experience. But our very logical, systematic society pulls us away from that.
Yeah, it doesn't work in a logical way, does it? It's not like a straightforward tick box, the same for everyone, in a nice, neat timetable.
Yeah, because when you say to mum sometimes, well, that 40 weeks is just kind of, it's not really an accurate gestational period. It's just something someone came up with many, many years ago. And you can see their face. I said, why don't you ask your mum how long she was pregnant for, and if you know your grandma, and if you can go further back and see if there's an average date for women in your family. And also, there are different ways of calculating your due date. For the one we use in our system, go away. I often say to mums, every so many months I'll come out with this, go away and use these different ways to calculate your due date. And then mums come back and you can see them thinking, well, actually, I think my baby is going to be 2 weeks after this date I've been given by the hospital, or sometimes it's a bit earlier. But just having that basic information, which if you like your stats and figures is a bit more black and white, will give you the confidence to say, no, I don't think this is right for me. I don't think my baby is ready yet. Or else actually, yes, I feel that my baby is, because I'm feeling it intuitively, but also I have had the ability to do some research and do some figures, and numbers make me feel happier. So there is information out there for us if we look for it. But again, it's all going back to, we have a overstretched system that just wants it to work for the system. And there's individuals in there trying to make changes, but it's really hard to make changes on an individual basis. It goes down to just stop scaring mums, really.
Yeah, that's very...
Stop making them frightened of birth or frightened of having a choice. I mean, I have an amazing mum in one of my classes at the moment who's having baby number 2. There's quite a big gap. So her daughter is 8 or 9, I think. So quite a big gap. And she wants to have this baby at home, but was told by the first consultant she saw, she had an emergency cesarean first time round. No, there's absolutely no way you can have this baby at home. There is a high chance that you or your baby will die if you do this. And she stood her ground and said...
It's grounds for complaint, because that's against the code of conduct to say that out like that. That's not how they are supposed to respond to you at all.
Yeah.
It's actual grounds for complaint, which you don't want to do when you're pregnant, but you can fire your consultant, right? You can say, I don't want to have that consultant again, thank you, they're not listening to me.
Yeah, she doesn't.
I'm glad she's standing your ground.
Yeah. And she's 38 weeks now, so hopefully
wonderful
soon is going for a home birth. But she says herself, I wouldn't have been confident enough to do that first time round. And that's where we need to support mums more. We would never want to do anything that would put mum or baby at risk. And if all the medical indications are you need to have this certain birth, this is the right birth, then that's 100% the right choice to take. But I think most of the time that's not the case. Most of the time it's just might be a big baby, might be a small baby. Well, actually you're 41 weeks pregnant now and you should only be pregnant for 40 weeks. Let's have an induction. Mums get called into the midwives for a normal appointment, and all of a sudden they find out they've got 2 sweep dates and an induction date, and they're only 29 weeks pregnant, and they're thinking, oh, does that... Lots of mums think you have to have an induction. They're not told that it's optional.
Yeah, that's a really big thing. I'd like every woman to know that if the system has got a little protocol in place where we like to have it organised and we book everyone in on standard for these inductions and sweeps without even asking, that actually you don't have to do any of those. You just cancel them all. You don't have to do it, particularly if they've been booked in advance, because you can't know whether you want to have them or not, because there might be a medical indication or there might not be a medical indication, but you may have a definite opinion. Again, it all comes back to, inside, when you've presented with the evidence and you have a choice, you know what is the choice for you, and you will always take the choice that's best for you and your baby. No one is going to take a choice that's harmful to their baby, but we want the information. We want to be treated with respect and dignity that believes in us to make a choice.
Yeah. And for some women, they may want to have an induction at 41 weeks. That may feel right. But for lots of women, it doesn't feel right. But we're so compliant, or we genuinely don't understand the system. We don't know there's a choice because we're not told. We do it. And then people are disappointed. And it's really sad to see a mum who is disappointed in her baby's birth, who thinks it could have been different or should have been different, or if she'd known then what she knows now, she would have made a different choice. And that's where the system fails, I think, not giving women all the information they're entitled to so they can make the right choice. And that's really sad.
Do you see certain red flags happening sometimes when you're working with mothers, like the compliancy, that if you see someone who has a pattern of those kind of things, that you can kind of see it coming almost? There's certain areas where if we can be aware and make a change, that can help prevent that disappointment from happening.
Yes, I think so. I think if somebody's naturally compliant, they're probably going to go down see how pregnancy goes. If baby hasn't come, I'll have my 2 or 3 sweeps and then I'll have an induction, because that's just what they do, because that's what they've been told by their midwife to do, and that's what appointments have been booked in for them. Sometimes women are amazing and then they'll be towing the line as such, and then at 38 weeks pregnant they'll say, no, I'm going to wait because it just doesn't feel right. Often second time mums who've been induced first time round and don't want to be induced second time round are much more ready to say no. But again, you shouldn't have to go through it the first time to have the choice the second time. You should have all the information second time round. You have mums who are genuinely fearful of birth because there's an innate fear in them, there's a past life experience that they're not consciously aware of, or they've been told by their mum or their friends or their grandma that birth is difficult and horrible and painful. So you grow up with that view of birth, don't you? And you go into it, and not every woman is prepared to explore her fears and able to resolve them. You know, my message is, don't step into that birth space still fearful, because whatever fear you have, there are ways to lift that fear or explore it and understand it better, rather than the moment you realize you're actually having your baby and it's too late then, and you're carrying all those fears and they're just going to come out in your body physically. You know, you are going to be anxious, you are going to be tense, your baby's going to feel that your partner's going to feel that. The whole aura in that room is going to be very different than if you'd released those fears beforehand. But again, some people genuinely believe they can't release those fears. They genuinely believe that that's just how they feel about birth and it's never going to change. But I have one lady in my class at the moment, again, is due any moment now, who, when she first started, said, I have tocophobia, I have a morbid fear of pregnancy and birth. And she was really, really anxious when she came to the first classes, but she's come to my classes from very early on, referred her to Alexia stuff. She's done a lot of that. She's got the book. She's read it. She's done hypnobirthing as well. You know, she's done all of her birth preparation, and she is such a different woman, you know, in terms of how she's prepared for this birth and the place she's coming from than when she first started in the classes when she was 12 weeks pregnant. So it's lovely to see those journeys and think, well, actually, hopefully if we've changed it for that lady, then we've changed it for her children as well, because they will have a different view on birth to the one that she had. And a lot of her fear was the stories she'd been told from her family. And I think there is a culture of, like one of my mums did say, I feel shame because I had such a lovely birth experience. She said, I feel I can't talk about it because so many mums don't, and therefore I don't tell anyone, which means we hear fewer and fewer positive stories and all the not so positive stories. And therefore people think, well, I've heard one positive birth story but 27 not so positive, and they think therefore more births are unpleasant. And I don't think that's actually statistically true, but I do think there is a bit of a culture of, please don't shout about your positive birth experience.
And people that have had traumatic birth stories actually need professional help, or even if it's maybe a friend or family, a space to unpick and explore that's not the pregnant woman that you're telling the story to.
Yeah.
So that isn't helpful for any pregnant woman to hear. But you, if you've got that story to tell, we want to tell our birth stories. If you've got that, find someone who's not pregnant.
Yeah.
So, and if you need it, someone who is experienced as a counsellor or some kind of therapist to help you unpick that and heal that, so you are not spreading that story, and you can find peace in yourself and make you.
Yes, because you shouldn't be carrying that around with you. You need to be healed. But there is a thing, isn't it? As soon as people find out someone's pregnant, they go, oh, well, let you tell me about my great aunt Ethel, who was in labour for 87 days and blah, 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 blah. You know, and people do that, and mums will go, I don't know why, it just, as soon as people find out I'm pregnant, they want to tell me all these really traumatic birth stories. I don't want to hear them. I don't know why people think I do. But again, it's people who themselves haven't had the ability or the privilege to heal. Which is why another issue of our system is women who don't have the birth experience they want, or a traumatic birth experience, are not getting the help they need. You can have a debriefing here in Birmingham, and I do lots of my mums, even the mums I haven't seen through pregnancy, that come to my postnatal class. They said, look, have you spoken about it? Have you gone and had a debriefing, which is, better than nothing, but it's still kind of, you have a debriefing and then you kind of, there's nowhere really to go from that unless you pay for it yourself or find the right resources. There isn't enough resources. There isn't enough time spent for mums who need to be healed from a birth experience. So physically, we don't do enough to look after mums physically or emotionally postnatally, because we've lost the village, haven't we?
Even if your birth isn't traumatic, you often need to unpick elements of how it went, even if it's positive or if it's just ordinary. There's a need to transition to motherhood that includes hearing your story, being looked after physically, being helped to unpick the new identity you've got now. It's a journey that, irrelevant of any trauma, that we shouldn't have to discuss the negative, like there shouldn't be all these negative things that can be prevented, but just the journey itself. Every journey in life has highs and lows and challenges, and a place to unpick that, to find your identity and your confidence as a woman.
Yeah, but and I also think that unpicking would help mums to realise that they didn't do anything wrong, that it wasn't their fault. I think that's a lot of it. Well, if I'd done this, or if I'd done that, or I hadn't done this, or I hadn't done that, and women don't have the ability to talk it through with someone to understand that sometimes things just happen. And maybe next time you could try doing something a different way, but it's not, you weren't at fault, you haven't done anything wrong, but people hold it as guilt, and they hold it around as guilt, which is disempowering. I think that's why we're seeing more and more women going using doulas and having postnatal doulas, just to be able to process these kind of things and get that support. But obviously that's a luxury that not everyone can afford. So kind of almost, do we end up with a two-tiered system then, where birth becomes more privatized? I don't know. I guess that's a huge ethical and political debate there. But not everyone can afford to get that extra care, can they? It's hard.
It comes back to valuing the mother, and points valuing the mother, and then checking in yourself if you have that ability to say no. Confidence to have boundaries on what you want, all linked together.
Yeah, it's a shame we don't value the mother, but it reflects generally how women are viewed in society historically, which hopefully is changing. Being the mother of 2 teenage daughters, I hope it's changing. But we're not held in the high esteem we should be. You know, we are the creators of the human race. But again, I think because women have been giving birth for centuries and the human race is continuing, it's just seen as normal. You know, going back to the very first point, you don't get a medal for having a baby. No one's waiting for you with banners and cheering you as you cross that finish line, are they? Sometimes, but for most of us, we come home and it's just completely overwhelming and utterly terrifying. Having a baby but bringing your baby home is much more scary than running a marathon, definitely.
You had your own journey of confidence, didn't you, with your 2 children? It's helped you to become confident. What were the things that helped you the most on that journey to become more confident as you got more experience giving birth the second time?
What, in terms of birth or actually parenting?
Well, I guess birth first, but parenting could they're kind of not too separate, really, are they?
No,
they're not separate as we think.
I think I never doubted my ability to be able to give birth. I just intuitively knew that I could, but I've always had faith in my body from when I was a small child. And I spent a lot of time outdoors, doing outdoorsy stuff, being in nature, being outside, talking to the trees and the flowers and just feeling what earth was like. So I always believed in woman's ability to give birth and to be strong. So I always went into birth feeling confident. I think I was obviously, worried and concerned, and the first time I'd done it, you've never done it before, so it's a new thing. But as soon as I felt the surges, I just went with them. I mean, they were very intense because the girls were both born within 2.5 hours from nothing to being here. The births were extremely intense and full on, but it didn't, I don't know, I can't explain it. I just listened to my body and went with my body. But I had prepared in my own way. So I wasn't an avid reader. I didn't devour every single book on birth because they didn't feel right for me. I intuitively wanted to let my body do it. And I wanted to be fearless and put myself in the best place to keep, the fight or flight adrenaline levels low, and go with it. That's not to say that when I first realized I was having surges with Grace, I didn't immediately go into, oh my God, right, the baby's coming now, what do I do? And, I have Grace in hospital, so moving from home to hospital is not much fun. I had Neve at home for that reason, because I felt that move interrupted the flow for me, and having Neve at home was amazing. So birth for me was something that I always believed I could do, and I'd done my preparation and I understood the process, so nothing frightened me about it. Bringing the babies home or having them home was utterly terrifying, because no one doesn't, you'd learn that on the job, don't you? You become a parent, as they say, when a baby's born, a mother's born, you become a mum, and you're responsible for a human. Mm-hmm. And that for me was really overwhelming. And I ended up with lots of anxiety and depression after Grace. Mm-hmm. So bringing myself out from that really dark place, which was really dark, back into the light very, very slowly, denying it was happening for ages and ages, pretending everything was all right. I have a real issue with asking for help. That's one of my real big issues. I don't like to ask for help. So I didn't ask for help when I was struggling with Grace until it got that bad that I didn't really have any choice. And then I kind of gave myself a talking to and said, the classic, asking for help is being strong, not being weak. That was a real thing for me, not appearing weak. Once I'd got my head around that, things started to get better. But that was an issue I was holding on to from whenever, about asking for help. So I always say to mums, don't think that you're being strong by doing all of this yourself, because actually you're not. You make it so much harder. Be brave and ask for help, because there is always somebody to help you. And that I do wish that I hadn't been so pig-headed when I had Grace, and I would just said, look, I'm struggling here. I'm not dealing with this well. Because I'd always been someone who coped, as most of us are. You go through life, you go to school, you go to college, whatever, you have a job and you cope and everything's fine. And then a baby comes along and your world is just turned upside down. And I'm still convinced that I could, do everything to a schedule, to a list, to get everything organized. And babies just don't do that. And I wish I'd just spent more time doing less. Mm-hmm. Just wish I spent more time sitting around with Grace, not worrying about the fact that I hadn't really washed. I was still in my pajamas. The house was a mess, because those things aren't important. But to me, they were at the time. And I think that made my journey into motherhood much, much more difficult than it needed to be. So What
helped you the most to come through that once you'd asked for help, once you'd realised?
Well, Kerry was really good and understanding, and just said, look, these things really don't matter. It doesn't matter that, you can't get back into your old clothes. It doesn't matter that the house is a mess. It doesn't matter that we're having takeaways. And Grace had really bad eczema as well as a baby, and I found that really stressful, because I'd had eczema. So I therefore blamed myself that she had eczema. And it was it's not your fault. You haven't done anything. She just has eczema, but she's still gorgeous and beautiful, and she's still happy and healthy. I'd lost the ability to think rationally about anything and everything. And it was just Kerry mainly there, and some lovely friends who realised that I was struggling. I think probably people realised I was struggling, but I wasn't letting people in at all. Once kind of the chink started to appear and there were little gaps, people came round and would just sit and talk to me, really, make me feel normal again and back to my old self. So it was a really, really slow process, but it was just the feeling that this happens to loads of mums. This is actually quite normal. What you're experiencing is normal. Loads of mums become anxious, depressed once they've had children. They feel overwhelmed. You are not on your own, and you are not a bad mum. Actually, that was one of the key things. You are not a bad mum. You're not failing. I think that must be one of my key things as well. Asking for help and failing. Don't like either of those. So once people said, you're not failing, you're not a bad mum, then it was like a whole weight had been lifted. Like, well, I don't have to pretend anymore. It's okay, because lots of mums are like this, and they are.
Yeah, that's really big. I can feel the energy of that you can be a good mum and you're not failing, whilst at the same time saying I'm struggling. Struggling doesn't mean you're a failure, doesn't mean you're a bad mum.
No. And, you know, would spend hours just crying on my own with Grace. And just because I did that didn't mean I was a bad mum or failing. I was just a mum trying her best and giving all I could at that time. And it's that affirmation, isn't it, that resets everything.
Yeah.
I think we need to hear that more as well. I think there is a more positive message around that now. I think there is a much more positive message that so many mums struggle with motherhood, that it's okay to say you're struggling. I do think society has changed in the last few years with that message, with all the publicity we're getting about postnatal depression and anxiety and mental health generally. I don't think it's moved to birth yet. I don't think we're being as supportive of women during birth as we need to be. I think we are moving towards being more supportive of women postnatally, because, you know, lots more high profile people are out there saying that they suffered with postnatal depression, and it's quite common. But yeah, you can be having the worst day in the world, floods of tears, not having cleaned your teeth for 3 days, but you can guarantee that that mum, almost guarantee, will be looking after her baby. She'll be being a good mum. She's not necessarily treating herself kindly, but she's a good mum. And that's what's important.
What would your vision be for the future of birth and motherhood?
Oh, wow. My vision of future birth would be that every mum had the birth she wanted, because she'd been given access to all the information, all the resources, all the people she wanted to speak to have a personalised birth experience for her and her baby, that she'd spent her pregnancy talking to her baby, listening to her baby, feeling how her body feels, and knowing intuitively what the right birth choice for her and her baby are.
So thank you. And do you have any final thoughts about that you'd like to leave with a woman who might be listening to this, that would support her to get a confident birth?
Yeah, I would say to her to ask herself what she wants from birth. What would her dream birth be? And why, why does she think she can't have that? And if she comes up with reasons why she thinks she can't have that, can she resolve those? So if it's fear, can she speak to someone about those fears? If it's because the system is telling her something, find someone else in the system, or step away from the system if she needs to. If it's because her mum is holding fears about birth and therefore is making her fearful, she needs to have a conversation with her mum or help her mum. You know, we should all have the right to have the most positive, empowering birth experience possible, and therefore we need to do the work ourselves to get that birth experience. Don't allow the system to do it to you. You know, this is your body, your baby, your choice. Find out all the information you need to find out, so that when the time comes for your baby's birth, you absolutely understand what it is you want. You know, having said that, things don't always go to plan, and never be disappointed if you don't end up with the birth that you'd envisioned. You know, be realistic, be practical, but don't ever doubt that you've done everything you possibly could to get that birth choice. If it changes, then that's just what happens. It's nothing that you've done wrong. It's not your fault. But there are choices out there. And believe and trust. Trust your body. Most importantly, I think we don't trust ourselves enough, because we're too frightened about what we've heard and what we've read and what we've been told about birth. Make up your own story.
Create our own stories for the future.
Yeah.
I like that. Well, thank you so much for talking to me.
It's a pleasure. No, thank you very much, and thank you for doing this. Hope it helps.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. If it reaches just one person, it's always worth it. We can transform transform the world, one person at a time. So starting with ourselves. So thank you.
Thanks, Charlotte. Thank you.